Here again, I'm going to try obviously to share with you a few things, and I've got the clicker, so that's great. Yeah, I'm going to try to share with you meaning a few things, which are essentially 2 or 3 different kind of thoughts. First thing, we're going to be talking about some of the key trends we are seeing. And what I wanted obviously to share with you is what do we see from the open website, because I think it's quite important to look at this from that angle, and you will understand in a few minutes why. We're going to be talking about the trends we are seeing, and each time I'm going to try to illustrate them with some showcases. And don't be surprised if some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you have already been discussed in the previous sessions, which were very, very good quality sessions. So I'm going to try obviously to stick to the level. If you were wondering why you should be listening to me, this is just because we are operating in 34 markets, which means that we're able to have a global vision and actually make a difference between the noise and the actual data and the trends. So we are trying, obviously, to get a perception which helps us to cut through, meaning some of the noise you can see in some kind of markets. And this is really interesting for us because, again, and it's not news for you because it's been mentioned, this particular region is far advanced when it comes to programmatic out-of-home. And I would like to really stress this out because in many, many reasons and in many kind of facts, you are more advanced than other kind of markets, including some EU markets. Now, we are operating in 34 countries, and we're going to keep moving and developing our presence in other markets. Obviously, being part of the JCDecaux group makes us a sort of a premium platform kind of approach, which obviously helps us to have very tight relation with media agencies, trying to understand what they want. We are positioning ourselves as a one-stop shop if they want to have a global kind of approach, and we're going to be talking about that in a minute. But what is quite interesting also is that we're not just working with JCDecaux, we're also working with a lot of media owners not part of JCDecaux, which help us to get also this complementarity in terms of coverage and in terms of environment. We can actually help media agencies and brands to actually address the different audiences they want. Some of the markets we are pushing obviously on Americas. You've seen it's not just North, but also South, Middle East, and obviously APAC. So now that is done, and I think I was fast enough on this, talking about view. Here we go. I will may be able to be invited next year. Let's get into some of the key things here. We're going to be talking about pressure on or in the open web and why that matters. It may not sound like it's something that you guys should be interested in. Wrong. You absolutely need to understand those because it's very, very likely that these trends will also apply to our industry in a few years or even are already impacting our industry. And why also? Well, essentially because all the growth that we've been seeing in this industry is coming from programmatic. Programmatic has been one of the growth driver of the out-of-home industry. So trying to understand how these budgets, programmatic budgets, are coming from the open web and what does that mean is going to help us to really understand the trends which are driving them, whether that's going to carry on, and two, that's also going to help us to really understand what is the size of the addressable budgets. We're going to have obviously also a view about how the buyers are considering the industry. The previous panel we had was absolutely good in terms of understanding what were meaning the drivers there. But it's going to be very important to really understand some of these trends. And obviously here again, some of these concepts have been shared with you, so I'm going to go faster on those. And then we're going to talk about international trends, what we are actually seeing and what is moving up north in mainland China, which is quite interesting, I would say. So, sorry, it's a bit long, but you're going to really understand. And it's, again, a very wordy slide, but I want everybody to understand the concept we're going to talk about here. First, we need to absolutely understand that it would be foolish to think that the 650 or 750 billion US, which are spent on digital right now on a global basis, are addressable for our industry. Now, it's not a reason for you guys to leave. It's not the end of the world, since there is still a large portion of these budgets which are addressable What is that portion? We're going to have a look in a minute. But the trend is we've got a lot of global platforms who have been able actually to capture the user attention. And this is where they are starting their online journey. And on this kind of platform, they're able to have the trust of these users and being able, obviously, to control the distribution of the supply. They do not just control the distribution of the supply, they also control the demand which is attached to it. And a portion of this demand is not going outside of this platform. So the addressable part of the market is just a portion which is going into the open web. The rest, we don't have a chance to get it right now. So that's a bit of a difficult things to understand, but the addressable market on the open web for our industry, and I'm going to give a number, meaning in a few minutes, is not the 600 billion US. Two, what we've seen across this platform, which obviously you've got the names there, these are the Google, the Meta, these are the Android, iOS kind of players, there's Roku, Amazon, Samsung, all these CTV kind of players. They don't just control the supply, they also control the demand. And the consequence of that is that the portion which is not staying on this platform is what we can actually trying to look at from an open web point of view. And to be fairly honest, all the tech players from the open web have been fighting to be able to get a portion of that. And we need to accept the fact that over the last 10 years, what have we witnessed? The fact that it's a quantity game versus a quality game, the fact that you've got a huge number of players who are recycling bid requests and so on and so forth, which is leading to a bid congestion with DSPs receiving 10, 20 times the different bid requests for the same impressions, which are creating, meaning a huge kind of volume of exchange, which is not necessarily driving conversions and money. What we've seen also, the fact that there is a lack of transparency, there is a lack of efficiency, and that's creating a lot of a burden on the DSP side to be able to manage that. What does that end up saying to us? That ends up saying to us that 90% on the open web of the bid requests are not even presented to any DSPs. And that's a staggering number. So that's the challenge we potentially will be facing. What does that mean then? That means that all the DSPs on the omni-channel side are trying to find solutions. They are trying to obviously build their own trust and transparency mechanism to better understand whether the information they are receiving is actually the right level of information for the right level of supply and to be able obviously to scale. So that means optimizing supply on their end, how they can access the supply in the right manner. And this is going to be obviously one of the key challenges for us also. It's not just about supply path optimization, it's also about whether this is the right and the signal fidelity is the right information that they are getting. And I am insisting on that because I think that it's not just about verification, which I know these markets is very, very in advance on. It's also how they're going to be able to filter the noise there. Jones Media did a very good exercise, and I mentioned a few minutes ago that I would give you meaning a roughly numbers. So Jones Media have done a pretty good exercise, and here obviously you can see the size of the big players. So you've got Meta, you've got Google, Amazon, and then you've got the rest of the walled garden players. The size of the bubbles here are the sum of the owned and operated and the open internet spend, which means that Meta is actually keeping all the demand they are getting. Amazon is actually keeping 80% and 20% gets on the open web, while Google is potentially releasing 46%. Google is the best place right now to be able to get demand from the other digital channel into our industry. This is what that means. Okay? So if you are working with an SSP not connecting to DV360, you should consider whether that's the way forward. Simple. Now, the size of the pie. I've said it's not the 600 million, but frankly, if you do a quick math, no, sorry, it's not the one I wanted. Here we go, that's the right button. Pretty much 44 billion. This is what is potentially released from this platform who are capturing users, get the data, get the money, and pushing that onto the open web. Clear? Okay. Now, obviously, here we've got a ton of guys, not big enough right now. Difficult, potentially they want to further capture that volume of money, but I think what is quite interesting is that this is what we are going for. Amazon playing a bit, Meta not at all. One of the big trends also from the media agencies is obviously the omni-channel topic. I'm not going to be speaking a lot about that because it's been very eloquently mentioned and presented by Karen here, so I'm not going to insist on that. But what is quite interesting, though, to see then is how interestingly out-of-home fits into the journey of the users. And this is not new for you guys. But what is interesting is that this trend is absolutely pushed by the media agencies for two reasons. First, it's a great way for them to leverage the data they've got on the other channel, which have been embracing programmatic before digital out-of-home, talking about display, video, radio, TV. But it's also a way for them to actually defend themselves from the walled garden platform who've been able to engage directly with brands. By offering a multi-channel solution in response to a brief, they are differentiating themselves. Google is obviously trying to fight that by engaging with the open web much more. But that's the big trend. And so this is a bit of a point that we need to keep in mind. The best way for the out-of-home industry to be able to capture more of the open web demand that is not coming to the media is through omni-channel campaign. Easiest and simplest. A few ways to illustrate that. I've said that I would provide illustration of it. That was in the UK, that was Dell. It was a programmatic digital out-of-home mobile and desktop kind of campaign. It was about increasing brand awareness and drive purchase intent, plus 6 points on the purchase intent, and 2 times more efficient than the same channel without programmatic out-of-home. So that's a perfect example where programmatic out-of-home is bringing a very unique additional way to reinforce a message with tangible impact. That's for that brand in the UK, but frankly, if you don't like this brand, you don't like the UK, look at the German market. Pretty much programmatic out-of-home, social, and CTV, it works equally well. Here the point was for Nespresso with Group M, increasing the top-of-mind preference amongst coffee lovers, and we know that since obviously the concept of the Nespresso capsule, meaning has become in the market, a lot of players have been trying to jump on that. And so their point is how they can still, while they are more expensive, carry on being the top, meaning buy. And actually it was very, very efficient for them. 48% uplift in unaided brand awareness and 46% uplift in Nespresso being the first choice in the category. Listening to your clients is always essential. Listening to media agencies, to CMOs who have a budget, who are actually spending money in this industry is what we try to do on a daily basis. And when we did the State of the Nation, when we talked to the 200 professionals from this region in 2024, trying to understand how they were using the medium, whether they would be keeping investing and so on and so forth, what we've understood back then, 28% were saying that they would be increasing their investment in programmatic out-of-home in the next 18 months. It was pretty much meaning the overall global average that we had over the 6 markets which we tested back then. In 2025, we did more regional kind of approach. We did a State of the Nation just for the Nordics markets, which were obviously Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. 37% were talking about we're going to be investing more. And in mainland China, 70% which is a big number. We've never seen such a big number across any market since we've been starting to try and test with such a state of the nation. Which tells us that China is starting to open themselves to programmatic out-of-home. China is a massive country, second biggest advertising market in the entire world. But the fact is, out-of-home is lagging behind. The leading player, Focus Media, they are changing, meaning the ads with USB. So the screens are not connected as well. And obviously my friends from Hivestack know that because they've been working in this market for quite some time. So there is still a lot of things that needs to happen for this actually to work. But what I'm just trying to say here is it is happening and that's going to be massive. What the clients are also asking, they're asking for simpler ways to activate programmatically across audiences. They don't want to be caught into, I need to have 1, 2, 3, 4 private marketplace deals with 4 different media owners to be able to have a greater coverage on an audience segments in any given market or country. It does not scale. It's going to be a nightmare for them because you can imagine if you are talking about a cross-border campaign, if you're talking about a regional campaign, you need to have 14, 15 deals. It doesn't make sense. They're not structured for that. They don't want to do that. This is where curation is bringing, meaning a real kind of solution, and that's the second big trend. Curation is going to be moving faster. It's actually responding to a big need. Example of that, Qatar Airways, who have not just been flying me up to here, but also meaning had the good taste to be able to be awarded the Airline of the Year in 2024. What did they do? They wanted to have a global message across 5 different markets. You've got the list there. And for them, they just did not want to do that with one media owner or going through a massive number of private marketplace deals, but did a curated deal with ViewSelect, which is our solution. So that's going to carry on like this. Now, you're going to tell me, OK, but wait a minute. Out-of-home is well known as brand media, very local clients. How does that compute? Well, this is the next topic, right? Cross-border bookings. It's booming, growing really fast. Going fast. When we are talking, and with the state of the nation, the global clients, it was 10% of their overall global booking were across markets in 2023, 17% in 2024. For the region, Nordic region, 28% of the respondents book a pan-Nordic campaign. So not just their market, but all the region. Including Europe, it went to 18%, and on the global booking campaign, 15%. I can really tell you that wasn't happening before. Why? Because programmatic make it easier, and they want obviously to leverage that. And also because it's making these media more addressable and accessible for digital buyers who can now try new things. China, 25%. And that's absolutely amazing. Why? Because here you've got campaign from the outbound volume of business, which Chinese brands are investing outside of China to support all their exports. Here we're talking about a pie between 10 to 12 billion US every year. And let me tell you guys something. Before it was essentially going into performance on Meta and Google, it's no longer the case thanks to Mr. Trump, who's been who's been, let's say, challenging, meaning a few players on the tariffs and trades. So the US is no longer the key market for them. They are looking at other markets. What are they looking at? They are looking at markets where you've got people who can actually afford all their devices, their new EVs, and so on. That's a good news for you guys. OK? And a few quick data here. 37% of our revenue in H1 2025 is actually coming from multi-market campaigns. So that's going to come. and that's going to come fast. Few examples. ByteSIM, so that's in Hong Kong, and that's obviously trying to address all the travelers who are going to be traveling, want to get an eSIM, and that was a campaign which was running in Singapore. Pretty good results. Or DreamE, that's an appliance brand from mainland China. They wanted to do a campaign in the US for CES, and it was actually working quite well for them. So this is actually starting, and I hope it's not going to be just a few numbers, but that's going to materialize in the sustainable, large-scale volume of money for the industry. Thank you.